Good morning. Today on Spotlight, an in-depth look at how the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan is impacting this region with their many initiatives and millions of dollars in philanthropy. Marian Nolan, president of the 35-year-old foundation, will be my guest. And later in this program, we'll remember the late Detroit Congressman John Conyers Jr. It's Sunday, November the 3rd. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. And welcome to Spotlight. Marian Nolan, good to have you back. I can't count the number of times throughout the years you've been on Spotlight, but I remember shortly after the Community Foundation was started, way back when you were a guest.
Yes, I remember that well, and thanks to you, we've had some success.
Well,
you helped start us up, and I really appreciate that.
Well, we're glad to do so. Let me ask you a question. For that person that maybe has not followed the Community Foundation for 35 years, say you were on a cruise and you ran into a billionaire and you told them that you're president of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, and they said, "What's that?" What would you say in a rather brief period of time before that next person came up and interrupt your conversation with that billionaire?
I'd say come to Detroit, and the Community Foundation is here to help all people enjoy a high quality life in the 7 counties of Southeast Michigan. We do that by making grants to charities that provide all those services that we really enjoy and we need. We are able to do that because people leave us money. It can be while they're alive or in their wills. And we then invest it, build a permanent endowment, an endowment for the community, and make grants. And you know, this is a really generous community. We have over $900 million in assets, and we've given away over $1 billion to nearly 70,000 different grants and activities over the 35 years.
That's got to be a neat job, to be in the position to be able to give money to people who need it. I would imagine the downside is the fact that you have money to give and everybody feels they should have some of that money.
Oh, I'm very privileged. It's a great job to have because you meet people who care, so they will share their resources, and you really can work with the people who need the support. So it's a humbling kind of activity, and every day we see needs of people that we can actually help.
How do you measure the impact that you're having on Southeast Michigan?
We measured a number of different ways. First, we look at each organization and the grants we've made, and have they made a difference? And then you can take a subject like increasing the regional economy. What an amazing activity that would be. But we have actually helped build new businesses. And if what you want is a thriving, diverse economy, and we have, through the about $100 million we've given to help startups and support entrepreneurs, we know we've had a $2.9 billion economic impact, which you can judge. So it's really important to know that you've made good investments. You want the return on that investment for the people of Southeast Michigan.
How do you spread it around in an equitable way, realizing that you cover a wide territory? And certainly with the revitalization of Detroit, there will be people who say, well, Detroit's the heart of it all. It's the largest city in Michigan, so we ought to get the lion's share. But you also want to make sure that you're taking care of Oakland and Macomb and their initiatives as well as other areas. How do you sit down in that room and say, when it's all said and done, everybody has a piece of that pie?
Well, first we have a board of directors. Those trustees actually make the decisions, and so we have a staff that helps look at those opportunities. And one of the things we've been trying to do for 35 years is break down the boundaries that we see geographically and otherwise in the 7 counties. And what are the ways that we can work together? Because we're stronger together, actually. And so, for example, we started helping build greenways. And you think, why do you build greenways? Well, first, it's good because it's safe places for people to get out and exercise.
Right.
But we said 2 communities have to come together. We'll only make a grant if you work together.
Okay,
And
so create a little competition too.
Competition, but also saying, look at your neighbors. So we've now done this for so many years. There's now hundreds of miles of greenways that do connect in almost a spider web kind of thing around the 7 counties. Everything from here in Ann Arbor down to to Monroe and up into Port Huron. Think of the riverfront. That's a greenway. So Detroit has been a major part of building these around different neighborhoods. A lot more to do, but this was a way to bring people together. If you're on a bike and you're riding across a greenway that crosses 8 Mile, you don't know you've crossed 8 Mile.
Yeah. You've been with the Community Foundation since day one, if memory serves me right. Are you surprised where the foundation is now 35 years later? Would you ever have imagined that you'd be where you are and the amount of money that you're having to be able to give out?
Well, I think the first couple years we really didn't know, but Joe Hudson started us. He had a vision that it was important for charities to have some permanent assets, particularly in downtimes when the needs are up. You need some revenue so that you can meet those needs. I guess it was pretty evident early on that this is a hugely generous region and that people did want to reinvest in their communities.
Why do you think this region is so generous compared to some other regions which are not as generous? And we aren't the biggest city in the United States. We aren't the wealthiest.
But I think it comes because there's a pretty strong religious base and you learn to give and share. And also, people share when there's needs, and we do have needs. So it's a good tradition. There is this tradition of giving annually. There was not a tradition of building permanent endowments. So one of the first things we did was to help other charities start to build endowment. And in fact, there's now over 200 other charities working with us to build their endowments, because you need that permanent, secure cash
Sure.
when we have our next downturn. And I hope we don't have one for a long time.
We hope not.
But now that there will be some endowments, that helps a bit.
All right, we're going to sneak a little break in here. When we come back, I want to talk about how some of the tax laws have changed and what impact that may or may not have had on nonprofits. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. We're talking to Marian Nolan. She is the president of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. Okay, so our tax laws have changed. Has that helped or has that hurt in terms of people giving? Because I think I saw a figure or heard that in 2018, giving was down compared to previous years?
Yes. In 2017, the tax law changed, so the first impact would be in 2018. And I think you're actually going to see more impact this year because it takes a while for people to catch up. I don't have definitive data, but the fact that most people will no longer itemize, nor will they be able to take the full value of their deductions, we're going to learn how much federal tax law policy impacts giving. So here's what my hope is. My hope is that even though people don't have that December 31 deadline, I know I used to sit down and write my checks and make my gifts at year end.
I'm guilty too.
But just because you don't have that deadline, don't forget the charities need your support. And as you think about we're coming into the holiday season, this is a time to remember that you should give. You should give something. And I don't think people are going to forget the charities they care about just because they might not get that deduction. Now, having said that, I think on the very high end, we'll see probably some difference, at least in the timing of their gifts. So each individual situation will vary, but in general, I think people are going to have to say, okay, I'm not doing this because I'm going to write it off in my taxes this year. I'm doing it because I care.
Sure.
And because the need is there.
Right, and as you said earlier, it's about from the heart and being able to live with yourself and say, if I have the means, small or large, why not give and help somebody or some other organization that may not have the means?
Absolutely, yeah. And you will feel good when you give. You really will. Right. So please, we're going to write our checks early, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and we think back to it happens on a small level, but it happens on a giant level too, when you just think about the fact that the city of Detroit, it was the nonprofit community and the Grand Bargain that played a major role in saved the city financially.
It's hard to think that it's already about 5 years. The 5-year anniversary of the bankruptcy settlement is just coming up. So you think of all the good that has happened since then. And I think the foundation community, locally and nationally, stepped up when they knew they could make a difference. None of those foundations had given to bail out a city. And it wasn't in their criteria to do that. But
Right.
when you know you have resources and you can make a difference, shame on you if you don't.
Right.
So they made a huge commitment.
No question about it. What are some recent initiatives that you're proud of? I know the Ralph C. Wilson and some others, and you've worked with the governor in terms of some hospitals. What's top of your list if you just have to go and say, I'm really proud of this?
Well, I'll go real fast.
Okay.
We have done a lot of really good work on the opioid addiction issue. We're making grants to hospital emergency rooms to help people get connected to the resources they need when they leave. Also into county jails, working with actually Wayne State in doing that. So opioid prevention is really important. Working a lot with the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation on youth sports, get our kids active, they're healthier. We know that some of the kids in low-income communities don't play sports because they don't have the equipment. So we have started lending libraries for sports equipment across the 7 counties, and we're seeing how this works. And the Y is a partner in that, so we're really excited about that. And then I also want to just make a pitch about the 2020 census.
Hold on one second. I want to sneak a little break in there. We'll come back because I know that's going to take a little bit of time to really explain to people so that they fully understand. We'll rush away here. We'll rush right back and we'll pick up
Sure.
on talking about the census. We'll be right back. All right, I cut you off. I apologize for doing that. The census is coming up every 10 years. That's a huge issue. But it's different this year because it's digital, right?
For the first time in the history of this country, the census will be done primarily digitally. So you will get a little code so that you can go in and fill out the information. What concerns us is that not everyone is familiar with how to do it digitally, may not have access to do it digitally. So what we're doing is we've just made about $1 million of grants into neighborhood organizations, libraries, all kinds of places to make it easier for people to participate. And why is it important? For every person not counted, we're likely to lose about $1,800 a year in federal support for each of the next 10 years. So if you don't fill out the census, think what you're costing all of, think about the human services and the healthcare and the kinds of things that we just won't get the money for. So if everyone just sort of makes a commitment, if I don't know how to do it, I'm going to find help. I'm trying to find a way to actually participate. You are going to be able, every one of us is going to be able to make a difference. In December, you'll start to see some national messaging, and locally we will really start a full press. Some of the cities are also doing that. The city of Detroit is very much involved in going to be reaching out to help people. So that if you and others can get the word out, I think we'll find ways to make it easier for people to connect and get the job done.
Sure. All right. You mentioned earlier the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. That's an organization that is unlike many organizations where they're trying to stick around for years. They're actually saying, we got a boatload of money, you got X amount of time to spend it, and when it's gone, it's gone.
That's true. And you started out talking about, are people generous? Well, here's an individual that actually left behind more than $1 billion to the foundation named after him, and they will spend down in 20 years. So there is a boatload of money out there, but they're being very thoughtful about it, and we're actually very pleased to be working with them on a number of initiatives, notably around kids, youth activities. So if you don't know the Ralph Wilson Foundation, they do have a website.
Right, and you can easily go to it. And for people who say, well, who was Ralph C. Wilson? He was from Detroit. Sports fans will remember because he was owner of the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
So he had big footprint in Detroit, big footprint in Buffalo and the New York area as well. So those were the areas that I guess you could say he loved the most, or he wanted to benefit the most as a result of it.
Absolutely, and they've done a couple things with us. They've started some endowment funds in his name for the charities that he cared about, so that they would continue to get the money that he'd been giving them. They also have funded some what I would call fields of interest. He was concerned in his later years about caregivers. Were caregivers trained? Did they have resources? So they'll be giving money in that area. But it's really for them to make their own case here. But I can just tell you that they're leaving money permanently to take care of those that had dependent upon it. And now they're doing some very, very exciting work here and in Buffalo.
All right. I'm going to take you back a little bit. Not too long ago, I was going through the archives and I ran across an interview we did in 2010. You were seated with Philip Fisher of the Fisher Foundation. At that particular time, I think it was something like $3 million that you all were giving away to help people with hunger and different organizations that make that part of their specialty. I know that you work closely with them through the years. Any initiatives perhaps on the horizon that you might be doing more with the Fisher Foundation?
We work with the Fisher Foundation a lot, and they were also a major supporter of the bankruptcy, so we worked with them there. They had a particular interest at that point in food and shelter. Mrs. Fisher was particularly interested in that. So we are eager to continue to work with them. A couple other things that we're doing in partnership with other foundations is that we do have this continued effort in training entrepreneurs so that we get more businesses located in our city and around the region. Why? Because the stronger the economy is, the better it is for all of us. And the Fisher Foundation has been a part of that, along with many others. We don't do anything alone. We partner with others because we don't have the resources to do major initiatives without a lot of help. And working together is really a way to make these efforts much stronger.
Very quickly before we wrap up, just wanted to give people some idea. In 2018, the Community Foundation provided 3,900 grants.
We did.
That's a boatload of grants.
Over $80 million into the region. And anyone who wants to learn about us, look us up on the web or give us a call.
All right, and they can do that very, very easily. Final quick question. You're optimistic about where Southeast Michigan is headed?
I've been here now a number of decades. I have never seen it so exciting. I do think we're on the right path around the region and in Detroit in particular. Every day there's something new happening. And again, I want to come back to where I started. It's because people make it happen and because people share and give. And I'm excited to be here.
And that's a good way for us to close. Marian, Nolan, thank you so much for coming in. We'll definitely get you back. You've been a regular throughout the years.
Thank you very much.
And when we come back, we'll reach back in our archives and we'll remember the late Congressman John Conyers, Jr. Stay with us. Welcome back. And finally today, our condolences to the family and many friends of John Conyers, Jr., the former Dean of the United States House of Representatives and the longest-serving African-American legislator on Capitol Hill. Through the years, Conyers was a frequent guest on Spotlight. So we reached back into our vast archives and decided to share some excerpts from an interview I did with him in December of 2006. When he was about to become the first African-American chairman of the powerful House Judiciary Committee.
After 20 terms in the House, finally, you become chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, very powerful committee. Was it worth the wait?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's fortuitous because it comes at a critical time, Chuck. We're now determining what direction we're going to go in after we've wandered out on the legislative desert for 12 years after the Gingrich 94 upset. Yes. There are many members who have never been in the majority before because they haven't been here that long. And so I think that this is as good a time, the best time for me, because we can now look anew at many of these constitutional issues, the voting agenda. We got a Voter Rights Act extended, but we've got still a lot of problems with voter integrity, and the technology is making it more difficult to patrol the voting process and to make sure that there are paper trails in the ballots than ever before.
Congressman, a lot of people are wondering which John Conyers will show up in January. Will it be the diplomatic statesman extending the olive branch, working bipartisan with the Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle, or will it be that strong liberal Democratic voice who's been very critical of the president? Some will say, are saying already, he's coming in as a headhunter and he's going to be the worst nightmare the Bush administration could ever imagine. Which one will show up?
Well, Republicans advertise me as the latter description, that, gosh, we don't know what's going to happen. He's going to upset the apple cart in a big way. We've got to win the support of many of the independents, many of the moderates who voted for a Democratic member in this election since the president wasn't up. So it's very important that we lay a very strong legislative track record in which people realize that what we are doing is in the national interest. An impeachment that doesn't have a real bipartisan strength, you cannot impeach on a partisan basis.
Are you convinced that this is a war that no matter what we do, we cannot win it?
We cannot win it because it was a mistaken war to begin with. It's unwinnable. And staying over there longer only increases the tension. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were never connected.
Congressman John Conyers, Jr., he can now take his place in American history. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.